Good morning readers, it's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf and welcome to an unplanned and unscheduled bookish breakfast. Except it is planned and scheduled, it just wasn't planned and scheduled for me until maybe half an hour ago. So what do I mean? I said last week, chronologically for me, that I wasn't going to be around for 8 weeks because I'm going away for a while and I won't be able to post while I'm away. But then I was lying in bed this morning and I kind of woke up wide awake at 6:30 and I had this kind of like little light bulb of, oh, I can schedule some videos. And I thought it would be nice to have some kind of like surprise videos appear. Like not for the majority of BookTube, it'll just be like more content, and we have plenty of content and most of it's a bit more coherent than this, but particularly for Roz scantily rambling about the books because she is my mother and I thought it would be nice. Like I had a video call with her yesterday evening with all of my family and it's kind of like saying you're not going to see my face for 8 weeks, so yeah, bonus face for my mother. So I gave myself till 8 o'clock to come up with some answers to some tag questions, and I am doing a tag called the Brandon Sanderson Tag, which was created by Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space, and I was tagged by my brother Alfred while he was joining my mum in creating the tag. So let's dive straight in. The questions for this are quite complex, and not complex to answer. Oh, and he didn't bring my books to wave. You're just going to have to deal without the books to wave around because I didn't have that much time to plan. So I'm reading them off my tablet here. So, question number 1. Brandon wrote many early novels while helps if you can actually speak, doesn't it? Brandon wrote many early novels while working as a night clerk in a Provo hotel. What book kept you reading late into the night? And this is quite a common thing for me to do if I'm enjoying a book. Not so much now because there is somebody else who is bothered by me staying up late reading. But then he does also like to stay up late doing other things. So sometimes if I go to bed before him, maybe I'll read for like an hour or so until he finishes his evening. But the books that keep me up, like as in like actually actively keep me awake, one classic would be Agatha Christie books. So normally if I start one, I finish it the same day or the next day, and if I finish it the next day, it's because I finish it at 3 a.m. So one that I think that happened with this year would have been one called Third Girl. I was slightly underwhelmed by that book. I did enjoy it, but I didn't find it like the best book ever. Best Agatha Christie book ever. But I definitely stayed up reading it late into the night. The next question, sorry, I was reading on my notes page, but I need to be reading from the tablet. Brandon's complex magic system set his fantasy apart. What subject do you love to read about in all of its complexity? Yeah, I really love Brandon Sanderson's magic system, kind of creation ability. Like, it just puzzles me all the time. Like, we sometimes talk about his writing, me and my partner, because my partner loves his work, and we talk about, and we just like, how does he do it? Just how does he do it? But anyway, yeah. Complex thing that I like to read about. I love reading mythology, and I love reading different versions of myths, and I love reading one thing that I've liked doing the last couple of years is Sagalong, which happens in February, where we read bits of the Icelandic sagas, and it's just knowing that thing is so crazy and complex, and you read this tiny little bit of it, and it's part of this amazing like fabric of myth that stretches for miles, and I also love reading about like the historical basis and the historical background, and like going to museums that might also cover some of that time period. So yeah, that's an area that I get quite interested in, particularly like Nordic myths, I suppose, but just because those have been maybe more accessible in terms of places where we can go to. Like, we live in an area where there's like a Viking museum just about an hour away and things like that. So that's something that it's easy to get into. But yeah, mythology in general, I would say. So 2 books that handle a theme. Oh, sorry, I keep forgetting that I have the actual proper questions here. Brandon gets book ideas from watching other storytellers fail to execute a concept well. He figures out how to do it better. What 2 books handle the same concept in strikingly different ways, and which do you prefer? So I was going to get 2 books out for this, and it would have been quite like entertaining because they're 2 books that handle a similar theme in a similar way, in a slightly different way, sorry. And I have the editions from the same, like I think they're Penguin World Classics, so the ones with, I was going to say the ones with black spines, but loads of penguins have black spines, and then they have like a black and white photo on the front. So I have chosen Anna Karenina and Madame Bovary, and these are two books that focus around a married woman who is dissatisfied with married life, with negative consequences for all, just saying without spoilering too much, things don't go super well in these books, and both of them are books written by men as well, that focus on this main female protagonist, antagonist, not sure, so which is, yeah, they definitely approach the theme differently, and they definitely present those characters quite differently, and I would say that I prefer Anna Karenina by about 5 miles. Like Madame Bovary, you can see that it's a good book, and you can see that it questions a lot of deep and important themes, but I didn't like the writing style. I found it very difficult to warm to Emma Bovary, and I think it's quite important for experiencing the emotion and the difficulty that I should be able to feel some sympathy for her, at least to a certain extent. Whereas Anna Karenina, obviously it's a much bigger and richer book because there's a load of other characters that are involved, but it's got such an emotional punch, and even though you know that she makes some wrong decisions, but you don't hate her for it, or you don't despise her for it. You can kind of see it in her mind why she does it. So yeah, I think that's two different approaches to the theme that manage it quite differently. So, next question. Remember to read it from the right place. Child Brandon was recommended several books about dogs that die. Oh, how tragic. As a result, he became a reluctant reader. Please share a formative good or bad childhood reading experience. So one bad childhood reading experience that I don't know whether it counts as formative or not. I don't know what it was called, but I think my grandma had this book of like German fairy tales or something, or German cautionary tales, and on the front cover, or a very big picture on the inside, was this woman with yellow hair that kind of radiated out massively, and fingernails that just went on for miles and miles, and that picture just provoked a very strong visceral reaction in me, and I was really, really quite scared of that picture and that idea of that book. And I think at some point, like, my brother acquired it, and then it was on my brother's bookshelves, and I used to not really like going near to that bookshelf. And I must have been like relatively old, because if my brother and I were in separate rooms, I must have been like 8 or 9, and I didn't want to go near the bookshelf that had that book in it, because I was so worried about this unnerving picture. Formative, I don't know, because it didn't really change my approach to reading. It didn't stop me from reading things. But maybe formative is in I don't like scary books still, so maybe it's affected my choice of genre. I don't know. So, Brandon and several friends host the Writing Excuses podcast, and they frequently invite guests. Please tell us about a collaborative fiction project and what you thought of it. This is when I definitely should have picked these books up, because because it's called Vita Nostra, and it's written by a pair of siblings, I believe, and their name is, they're not Russian, but they wrote the book in Russian, so they're from that kind of area of Europe, kind of like northeast Europe, and the surname is like Jachensky. I'm going to have to write it in the description. And that book is Vita Nostra. And it's an amazing book. And I really wonder how you can work so well with another author, even if it is your sibling or your spouse or something. Like, how can you collaborate that well and that intensely on a book that is bizarre, really interesting, but really mind-perplexingly engaging, and how they managed to keep that consistent. You never feel like there's a section that was written by one and a section that was written by the other. It all comes together really, really well. And just how they managed to share that level of understanding of what they were trying to achieve in this world that is quite challenging to conceptualize. like you can tell that I'm struggling to describe it. So I'm very impressed by Vita Nostra. And I would highly recommend it, even if you don't typically like fantasy. I think it's like technically young adult fantasy, but it doesn't feel like young adult fantasy in any way of the world, in any shape of the word, if that makes sense. What is the next question? Brandon's first book, White Sand Prime, was rewritten and eventually converted into a graphic novel called White Sand. What book would you like to see in another format? So I'm going to cheat here, and I'm going to use one of Brandon Sanderson's own books, which is the only series that I've read. It's Mistborn, the Mistborn series, and that starts with the Final Empire, and then there's 2 other books I can't remember the name of right now, and I really love that series. So this one, I read it because my partner, Bo, he told me that it was his favourite book, and he read Pride and Prejudice, or he got through Pride and Prejudice, so I had to read Mistborn, and I read the whole series in maybe 4 or 5 days, and I loved it. I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed it. The writing is not at the standard of Pride and Prejudice, let's say, but you know, whose writing is as good as Jane Austen's. But the story and the characters and the plot, like it's really effective, really powerful, and really enjoyable. And I would love to see that series as a film. And there was a film announced in 2017, but it's not here yet, and I want it, because the magic system is so incredible, and so beautifully visualized in terms of the description. They would have like, it's basically, it's done for them. Like it tells you like how it should be. It's quite cinematic in the way that you read it. You kind of know how it should be staged and how it should be created, and what the settings look like. And I think that, I just think that it should be made into a film. And I think people would love it, because people do love big fantasy films, don't they? So I hope it happens eventually. So Brandon writes very quickly. What prolific author or authors would you recommend? I was talking about how we talk about him sometimes and wonder how he does it. And it's like, does he have ghostwriters? Am I allowed to ask that? Is it rude to him to ask if he has ghostwriters? Because the amount that he puts out, like on some years, I guess like not all of them are written at the same time, because it'll depend how long it takes to get them published. But you just think, how did he fit all of that into 1 year? Like, I'm trying to write at the moment, because I'm trying to do the NaNoWriMo thing. NaNoWriMo. And I've written like nearly getting on for 30,000 words so far this month, which is going to be probably last month by the time you see this. But anyway, I've written a substantial chunk, and to be fair, I wasn't doing that full time. I've maybe written like 1,000 words a day, and I feel like I could write more than that. But to write the quantity that he writes on the number of different worlds, it's very, very impressive. So yeah, he would be a prolific author I would recommend. But another one, just reverting back to somebody I used as the answer in the first question, would be Agatha Christie, because she wrote hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of detective novels. Hundreds might be an exaggeration, but loads, really loads, all of which are different and distinctive, although there are like, I suppose, character traits and tropes that emerge the more that you read them. But she also wrote non-fiction books, and she also wrote romance books under a different name. And it's just, how does she keep tabs on all of those characters and all of those books, and how does she make sure that she wasn't repeating herself? Which I think, to be fair, I think she sometimes does a tiny bit, which is why I'm so curious about Brandon Sanderson and how he manages to do it without being repetitive. But then I haven't read all of his books, so who knows. Next one. Oh, my tablet doesn't want to turn on. There we go. So, question 8. Brandon's Cosmere Universe books are grounded in Platonic philosophy. What book or series gets you really excited about the source material? So I mentioned earlier on that I am quite into the mythology. So I read recently, maybe earlier this year or maybe last year, The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and I haven't yet read Circe, but I know that I definitely should. And that got me quite excited and interested in the kind of Homeric legends. I finally read the Odyssey for the first time and stuff, and like reading that book that's inspired by those older stories, like quite like it borrows the whole plot from the older stories, does make me excited and interested to go back and read the Iliad, even though I've tried to read the Iliad. I've read parts of it twice and kind of ground to a halt. the way that she handles that just makes it seem more accessible, I suppose, because I wouldn't say that, like, it's really good. It's obviously, you know, thousands of years worth of people have thought that it's incredible and very interesting, but at times it is less accessible to a modern reader. So I think that she did a very good job of making me excited about the source material. I'm a little bit tired. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not sure if I'm really like holding the plot very well. But yes, let us get to question number 9. Brandon loves to show multiple sides of every issue and contrast character views. Please share a book that handles controversy well. So I've talked about 2 books about married women who aren't necessarily completely happy in the married state. And for this controversy, I'm going to move on to another woman who, perhaps in her relationships with men, struggled slightly, and that's Tessa the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. I would say it's maybe less of a controversial book today, but when it was released, it was definitely controversial in the way that he handled the theme of a woman who had had previous relationships and had like a history going on into her life. I mean, the book starts with her, I think she's 17 or 16 or 17, and then follows her over kind of the next few years. And when it was released, Hardy subtitled it Tessa the D'Urbervilles, A Pure Woman, and he did that kind of deliberately to challenge Victorian notions of what it means to be a pure woman, because he presents Tess as somebody who is very pure from a moral point of view. I suppose, well, I guess it depends what your views of morals are, but that contradicts some of the ideals of Victorian womanhood. And I think he does it really well, and I think he probably engaged a few people who wouldn't otherwise have been engaged in that topic. So that's one that I definitely enjoy. And then question number 10, final question. Brandon Sanderson is a writing teacher, and unlike some writing teachers, he posts his lectures online for free. What free literature resource are you grateful for? I'm going to have to say libraries, because it's amazing having a place where you can just go and, like, they don't mind you just sitting there and reading their books. Like, if you do that in a bookshop, they kind of expect you to buy something, but you can just go and sit in a library for hours and nobody cares. And that's really nice. And yeah, it's sad that this year we haven't been able to access the libraries so much. But the option is there, and that's nice for the future, I mean. And when I was younger, we used to go to the library every Saturday morning, and felt like we were there for hours every time we went, and we just like sit in the children's section or the young adult section and read books and kind of play in a slightly like gentle, quiet, library-ish way, and it was just like a really lovely place to be, just like playing surrounded by books while our parents would collect their books for the week and stuff. So that's a really lovely thing to exist, and hopefully it comes back sometime in 2021. So anyway, thank you very much for listening. That was the Brandon Sanderson Tag, created by Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space. I'm not going to tag anybody because I won't be here to watch the videos, and it feels a little bit unfair to tag somebody and then not watch it. Like, I always feel a bit guilty about that. But I recommend the tag, so go ahead and do it if you want to. Okay, take care.